one of the things about ancient Egypt that people don't often realize is that our Orthodox version of their civilization is not at all what they said their civilization was. They trace their roots back far further than, the beginning of the Old Kingdom, at like 3000 BC. Like the Egyptians called themselves a legacy civilization of the people that came before. So he has that perspective as well. Yusuf's, but he's epic. And I'd highly recommend him. A couple other guys like him as well in Egypt, but you can go there and get a real authentic. And I think it would really help Egypt because the more mystery and wonder you can inject into these things, the more people are going to want to go and see it. And I think there's a lot of that to be found there. There's, I think, less if you just, we know how this was done. The Egyptians built it all. They built the pyramid in 25 years, and it was done because everyone came and worked on it for 3 months a year or whatever. We know how it was done. The deeper you look, there's so many unanswered questions and so many aspects of this that haven't been studied appropriately yet. That they're not things that the establishment and I guess academia that have the permits and they control the access for research seem to be very interested in chasing down. But there are people out there that are doing it, and including guys in Egypt like Yusuf. There's an interesting correlation with things like the amount of underground cities, almost like Derinkuyu in Turkey, Cappadocia. There's underneath the ground at Saqqara in Egypt. People don't realize just how much is beneath the ground there, and there was quite likely a reason why people were down in the ground. Like Derinkuyu, I think in Turkey's something like 250,000 people could have lived down in these caverns.
Wow! And
it's why are you living down there? Like, what? It's not a defensive measure. Like, you can put water in there and you can seal. Like, it's not a good place to go if you're worried about people invading you. But it is a good place to go if the surface is going to kill you, which we know has now happened. Things like the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. There's been solar events. There may have been a strong reason why people may have had to go underground for generations, and we might be looking at some of the evidence for that in these places. I think there's a strong possibility of that. Like places like Saqqara in Egypt, which is where the step pyramid is, where they think that that's the first pyramid that came up. There's such a deeper level of sophistication beneath the ground than what's above it. This is a video that I'm working on at the moment. And there's something like at least 5 or 6 miles of tunnels beneath Saqqara. We don't really know how much the underground, how far it goes. And even Orthodox academics admit that there's the vast majority of ancient Egypt is beneath the ground. It's still beneath.
Wow.
So it's just all buried in sand?
Not just buried in sand, but in the bedrock. It's probably the most famous of these great Egyptian structures that has been lost to the sands of time. And it's one that we know about because we had guys like Herodotus and Diodorus Siculus and all of these historical figures were writing about it. They witnessed it. So you have Egyptian records of it. Then you also have these other records that come from other civilizations that sort of verify this existed. And this was something incredible. It was like thousands of rooms. It was the biggest, one of the biggest underground, like talk about it like 7 or 8 football fields, like massive multi-leveled underground labyrinth that is, you were said to have needed a guide to go through there. It was multi-levels. It was all granite, like massive granite walls. There's a lot of descriptions of it. It's incredible structure, lost to the sands of time, apparently. And Flinders Petrie, I consider him one of the pioneering archaeologists and Egyptologists that he was the first guy to really apply modern engineering techniques to try and find stuff. And he speculated that this was located at Hawara, which is there's a pyramid, like a mud brick pyramid. There's a big sands. It's just a pyramid, like a broken down mud brick pyramid with all of this sand there today. But he dug down the sand. He found big granite blocks, and he suspected that was the foundations of the labyrinth. Now, what later happened? There was an expedition called the Madahar Expedition. I think it was 2015, if I'm not wrong. That was done in coordination with this the Supreme Council, Antiquities, under Hawass at the time, and they went and did a bunch of ground penetrating, like 4 or 5 different techniques to look under the ground, and they found the damn thing. Like Petrie didn't find the foundations for it; he found the roof for it. He found the top layer. And what they found was that far below that, there's all these images you can see of it, like a grid pattern of all of these blocks. And it's this massive, everywhere they scanned, they found evidence for this labyrinth. And the funny thing about all this is that it really matches up with almost every ancient culture, our culture included. It matches up with our stories, religions, traditions, everything we say about our past. Even in the Christian culture today, it's like flood myths, fire myths. You can't poke a stick at any ancient religion without finding either flood or fire or some massive cataclysm that their ancestors barely survived and then had to rebuild. They were knocked back down and had to come back up again. And this holds true for Egypt, for Native American traditions, for our tradition, for that matter. So it's all these things kind of line up, and then we've at the same time been discovering that our species gets older and older and older. We keep finding older and older and older examples of Homo sapiens. We find more and more complexity in our DNA. Like we now know that there's some link between South American cultures and Australasian cultures that doesn't exist in Central and North American cultures or back in the day. So it really challenges the whole, well, if the people came into the Americas through that northern land bridge, how come those people in Northern and Central America don't have this genetic indicator? There's so much to talk about with these vases, and this gets down into sort of the engineering challenges of creating objects like these. And again, these are all made. So there's tens of thousands of these, 50,000 or more.
Wow.
40,000. Oh, they're everywhere. The 40,000 or more of these were discovered beneath the step pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, in those 6 miles of tunnels that I was talking about.
Holy shit.
And not only there, but also like the schist disc, which we can take a look at too. That's supposedly first dynasty. You have other objects like this that are admittedly pre-dynastic, so they're even older. I think a lot of these were inherited and reused, and there's some evidence for it. But just from an engineering perspective, they're utterly remarkable. And part of this is based on the material that they're made from. So a lot of these are made from granite, schist, diorite, even corundum. So stuff that's like 6.5, 7, 8, even 9 on the Mohs scale of hardness, which tops out at 10 with a diamond, which, some of this stone is incredibly difficult to work. This was a saw cut. This was a saw. See the curve to the blade? This was a saw cut that wasn't quite finished on this basalt block. A massive circular saw cut. This is at a place called Abu Sir. That's an Old Kingdom site. It's not somewhere that the general public can get to, but you can see the striations from the blade. You can also see the curve of the blade. This would have been a circular saw, perhaps a swing saw that was like probably 9 meters or so in diameter. I did a video recently about this box in Lahoon. This is a granite box carved from a single piece, not as big as the boxes in the Serapeum, but this is probably the most precisely made granite box that we've ever found in Egypt, in a granite room, by the way. This is all made from granite. And this thing has tolerances down to the thousandths of an inch as measured by Flinders Petrie. And again, he was the first guy to apply these engineering principles and try to understand how things were made. It's, I think, a discipline that's sorely lacking from today's orthodox establishment. It's an incredible, this place, there's 24 of these boxes, and there's some of them weigh 50, 60, 70, even up to 100 tons with the lid.
What are the dimensions of them approximately?
It's sort of probably, some of them are up like 15 feet long, and probably some of them are even longer. Some of them are up to 10 or 11 feet high with the lid.
Oh, so like that one we're looking right now, that's like 6 feet across or so, would you say?
At least, yeah.
At least.
There's a good, I think there's a clip of me. Where
wow, so those are absolutely massive, and there's a lot of them down there.
There's 20, and we've never replicated one of the. We it's funny. Chris Dunn did the experiment. He went and asked granite companies can you make one of these? Because again, the part that people forget about this, it's single piece of stone. Single piece. Both the lid and the box come from a single piece of stone, and you're carving it from a single piece of stone. Last year, and he actually went and took a modern surface roughness meter that measures sort of the flatness of surfaces down to the microns, and he laser scanned a bunch of these objects and things in India, and really got some tremendous results. And I think it really puts this idea that some of these objects and structures were made by hand to rest, because he's taken measurements, particularly in some of these caves in India, but also on the H blocks at Pumapunku, the boxes in the Serapeum. You're talking about single digits of microns in terms of flatness. And one of the walls in this cave has a surface roughness of around 1.5 microns. Now, a micron being 1,000th of a millimeter, like that's how flat this surface is, and over long distances. Like this is absolutely mind-boggling. And
What
clearly
does,
something else other than guys rubbing on it with rocks and sand was involved here. And the implications on history are staggering. Not just history, but technology as well, I think. So there's a lot more we should be doing to study this stuff, is what I'm saying. I think, and some of those answers may lay outside of our current realm of understanding.
I'm wondering what like the high-end finish for concrete is these days. Like how smooth can they get concrete, or even a sheet of glass isn't going to be close to that.
Well, no, a sheet of glass itself, you're at the almost this you are at the same rugosity or surface roughness of glass at that point. Yeah, you are. That's about the same as just glass, which it uses gravity. It settles on a level. It's like that's perfectly formed glass. It is orders of magnitude smoother than precision concrete. In the Serapeum specifically, in these alcoves with these boxes, and I think this is something else that sort of hints at a functional nature, there were these massive granite false doors. So these big pieces of granite, and they had this what's called a false door shape on it. You'll see it at the back of this box. And all of that granite, you can see it. There was one of them, like they were facing the boxes. In all the alcoves you had on either side, these big false doors, which I think are acoustically active devices. There's a few resonance chambers that use that shapes that you can still experience some astonishing resonance in.